Have you ever paused to think about a word we throw around all the time? Talent. We say, she's a talented musician, or, he has a real talent for number. It feels so natural, right?
It does.
But what if I told you that the very concept of talent holds layers of meaning, going way back, from ancient units of currency to some pretty profound ethical dilemmas about who owns your gifts and, well, how you use them?
It's true. The word itself, it seems simple on the surface, but it really unlocks a complex history and I think a very pressing modern debate.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront questions about individual potential, sure, but also societal responsibility and even the very nature of fairness in how we identify and cultivate gifts.
That's why our mission today is a deep dive into this multifaceted nature of talent. We're going to take you on, hopefully, a fascinating journey, weaving through academic research, some, well, truly lively philosophical debates online, and even ancient parables. We'll explore how talent is defined and developed, from bustling school systems to the largest global organizations. But here's where it gets, I think, really thought-provoking. We're also going to confront some profound ethical questions.
Right.
Is talent purely an individual gift, something you own outright? Or is it, in some sense, maybe a shared resource that comes with a broader societal responsibility?
That's the crux of it.
We'll dig into arguments for and against a moral obligation for gifted individuals, analyze critiques of modern talent management practices, and even revisit a famous biblical story to uncover its deeper and perhaps more challenging meanings.
And to guide us through this intricate landscape, we've gathered a really rich stack of sources. We're drawing insights from a recent academic paper by Fate Casinillo and Regina Gallegao, which looks at developing talents and virtues within global education systems.
Okay.
We've also tapped into a dynamic online discussion actually on Reddit, where people were passionately debating the moral obligations of the gifted. It got quite heated. And of course, we've done an in-depth analysis of the biblical parable of the talents alongside related theological concepts like stewardship. So it's a blend, empirical insights and deep philosophical reflection, trying to make sure we don't just scratch the surface.
All right, let's unpack this then. When we talk about talent today, especially, in our workplaces and organizations, what exactly are we referring to? It feels like it's got to be more than just being good at something.
In the modern organizational view, talent has become a highly specific term, almost clinical sometimes. It's often defined as the superior mastery of systematically developed abilities or skills.
Okay, systematically developed, that sounds key.
It is. Think about that. It's not just innate potential, but potential that's been deliberately honed, trained, practiced. This definition tends to narrow the field, often confining true talent to a pretty select group, maybe the top 10% in a given profession or area.
So it's exclusive.
It can be. While there's an acknowledgement that some raw potential might be innate, maybe genetic, the crucial element is its development. It's shaped profoundly by early experiences, access to opportunities, rigorous training, and consistent, often very deliberate practice. It's less about being born with it and much more about what you do with it,
So it's not just a lottery ticket at birth. It's more like a nurtured investment.
Yeah.
And when organizations talk about talent, they're not necessarily looking at every single employee, are they? It sounds quite targeted.
You're absolutely right. Organizations typically aren't looking at the entire workforce when they use that term. Their focus tends to be on what they call high performance and high potential.
Right, the stars.
Exactly. These are employees who, even as a small percentage, often just the top few percent, are perceived to make a disproportionately greater contribution to the business. They get labels like superkeepers or A-listers.
Wow, superkeepers.
Yeah, and what's fascinating and really critical to understand is that the definition of talent isn't fixed. It's not set in stone. It constantly evolves with an organization's strategic priorities and the ever-shifting work environment.
Like what's valuable changes.
Precisely. For example, maybe a decade ago, coding might have been seen as a niche talent. Today, it's pretty foundational in many fields. So the truly talented individuals in this view are often those who can adapt most successfully to these changing landscapes, those who learn how to learn, basically.
That makes perfect sense. It's all about perceived value and adaptability then. And when this talent is effectively nurtured, what kind of broader impact does it have? Does it go beyond just a company's bottom line? Does it contribute to society in a larger way?
Well, when talent is effectively nurtured, it's recognized as a vital form of human capital, literally, the human capacity that drives value. It's seen as the driving force behind innovation, which leads to improved organizational performance, sustained competitive advantage for businesses, definitely.
Okay, so good for the company.
Yes, but its impact certainly isn't confined to internal metrics. It contributes significantly to broader societal goals, too, through the unique skills, the breakthrough ideas, the enhanced capabilities these individuals bring to the world.
Like what?
Think of medical breakthroughs, maybe sustainable energy solutions, or advancements in education itself. It's seen as an investment with pretty far-reaching dividends that ripple through the economy and hopefully improve collective well-being.
So it's about harnessing human potential for widespread good, ideally. Now, moving beyond the corporate boardroom, our sources also delve into how this cultivation of talent plays out in educational settings. That academic paper by Casnillo and Gallegao highlights 3 key pillars for developing talents and virtues in education globally. Let's start with the first, talent management in education. What did that actually look like around the world?
Yeah, the paper shows that talent management in education is definitely a global thing, but with really varied approaches. They're all aimed at fostering and, importantly, retaining exceptional students and educators. The common thread seems to be an emphasis on specialized programs and dedicated professional development. If you look at the US, for instance, you see advanced coursework like AP and IB programs offering that academic rigor.
Right, I remember those.
Germany, on the other hand, has its renowned dual education systems, which, blend classroom learning with practical apprenticeships really well.
Very different.
Very different. And then Singapore, known for its academic excellence, implements very specific gifted education initiatives. They identify and nurture high-potential students from a really young age.
So it's not just about traditional academic excellence, but also about practical, real-world skills, right?
Yeah.
I think I saw examples of that, too.
Absolutely. Countries like India and South Africa, dealing with their own unique developmental contexts, have implemented vocational training programs and even national talent identification schemes. These are often specifically designed to address critical skills gaps and boost employability. And these initiatives are often complemented by robust, ongoing professional development for the educators themselves, making sure teaching practices stay cutting edge and aligned with what the workforce actually needs. It's kind of a holistic approach to preparing students for life beyond the classroom.
So while the underlying goal seems similar, nurturing talent, the strategies clearly vary a lot depending on a country's specific context and priorities.
Precisely. You see countries like Germany and Singapore leaning towards these highly structured systems that tightly integrate both academic and vocational training, often with pretty clear pathways from school into a career.
Right.
In contrast, the US and Canada tend to emphasize advanced coursework, fostering critical thinking, research skills, alongside substantial investment in teacher development to, elevate pedagogical quality.
Did India and South Africa?
They face distinct socioeconomic challenges, so they often prioritize addressing regional disparities. They use targeted initiatives focused on broad skill development and educational equity, really aiming to uplift entire communities. Each approach reflects national values and, frankly, economic imperatives.
And the benefits of all this effort. What are the tangible gains when talent management in education works well?
Oh, the benefits are substantial and multifaceted. Effective talent management in education leads directly to improved educational outcomes, obviously. It provides challenging, stimulating opportunities for students to excel beyond just the standard curriculum.
Makes sense.
It also significantly supports educators in their continuous professional growth, ensuring they remain at the forefront of their fields. This can translate into visibly higher academic standards, a much better alignment between what education produces and what the workforce actually needs, and ultimately enhanced overall institutional performance across the whole system.
But, no system is perfect. I imagine there must be significant challenges, maybe even unintended consequences that come out of these talent management practices.
There certainly are, and it's a major concern. One big issue is that these practices can inadvertently make existing educational inequities worse.
Oh, so.
Unequal access to advanced programs. It's often dictated by geography or socioeconomic status, meaning not all deserving students get the opportunities they really need. Plus, the high-pressure environments within some of these competitive talent programs can negatively impact student well-being. We hear about alarming rates of stress, anxiety, even burnout.
Yeah, that's worrying.
And adding to that, the quality of these programs can vary wildly. It creates this kind of patchwork of opportunities rather than a uniform system of excellence, which only deepens those regional disparities. It's a constant balancing act, really, between fostering excellence and ensuring equity.
That perfectly leads us into the second pillar of cultivating talent in education. Learning and development, or L&D. How does L&D contribute to talent cultivation, and what does it mostly involve?
Right. L&D learning and development practices in education across diverse countries share a fundamental goal: continuous improvement for both educators and students. Think of L&D like a vital software update for the entire educational system. Just like your phone needs regular updates to run new apps and stay secure, educators and students need continuous learning and development to keep pace with a rapidly evolving world.
Good analogy.
While the specific methods might differ based on local context, the main aim is always to enhance educational quality and effectiveness through targeted training and development. These practices are absolutely crucial for adapting to new educational challenges, integrating new research, and ensuring that teaching and learning methods remain relevant and impactful for future generations.
So it's about staying agile, staying relevant in a fast-changing world. What are some of the common elements we see across different educational systems when it comes to L&D?
A really notable commonality across most countries is the widespread, almost universal emphasis on ongoing professional development for educators.
So the teachers.
Exactly. And this isn't just a one-off seminar. It typically includes sustained workshops, intensive seminars, highly specialized training programs designed to help teachers refine their pedagogical skills, master new technologies, adapt to evolving educational strategies.
And beyond just teacher training.
Beyond that, many nations are actively integrating technology and innovative teaching practices into their L&D initiatives. This ensures their educational systems aren't just keeping up with global trends, but are actively preparing students for a digitally driven future, equipping them with the competencies needed for a rapidly changing job market.
And again, I imagine there are distinct contextual differences in how L&D is actually implemented across different regions.
Indeed. For example, Germany and Singapore are known for their highly structured, often formalized professional development systems. These might involve mandatory, comprehensive training programs for teachers that are really deeply embedded in their career progression.
Right.
In stark contrast, countries like India and South Africa often integrate L&D within much broader national educational reform efforts. There, the aim is often to address fundamental systemic issues and uplift overall educational quality, maybe at a more foundational level, improving basic literacy and numeracy alongside specialized skills.
And the U.S. and Canada.
They typically prioritize professional development with a strong emphasis on leveraging digital tools and pedagogical innovations, often driven by research and local school district initiatives, really transforming learning experiences through technology.
What kind of impact are these L&D programs ultimately having on the ground? What are the tangible benefits for students and educators?
Well, effective L&D programs make a tangible, significant contribution to improve teaching quality and, as a result, student outcomes. By continuously updating educators' skills and knowledge, these programs ensure teaching methods remain effective, engaging, relevant.
Which helps the kids learn better.
Exactly. This directly leads to enhanced student learning experiences, often reflected in better academic performance, increased engagement. Crucially, L&D fosters a culture of continuous adaptation. It allows educational institutions to respond more efficiently to changes, integrate new research, embrace technological advancements, and thus better prepare students for future challenges and opportunities.
But with continuous improvement comes, well, continuous pressure. What are the common obstacles in implementing and sustaining effective L&D initiatives?
You've hit on a critical point there. Challenges in L&D include persistent, unequal access to high-quality opportunities, which unfortunately often creates stark disparities between regions, schools, or even individual educators.
The equity issue again.
The effectiveness of these programs can also vary significantly due to maybe inadequate implementation, a lack of sustained follow-up, or just insufficient funding from local or national governments. Moreover, the constant pressure on educators to continually update their skills, embrace new methodologies, it can be overwhelming. This unrelenting demand, if it's not managed thoughtfully with adequate support and resources, can really negatively impact their well-being, leading to burnout, even reduced job satisfaction.
Finally, let's turn to the third pillar, capacity building in education. This sounds like it goes even broader than individual L&D. What exactly does capacity building mean in this educational context?
Capacity building in education is fundamentally about strengthening the entire ecosystem, the skills, the resources, the underlying infrastructure within educational institutions to enhance their long-term effectiveness and sustainability.
The whole system.
The whole system. Its core purpose is to holistically improve both teaching and learning outcomes, ensuring that entire systems are robust, adaptable, resilient in the face of evolving demands. Globally, these efforts are meticulously tailored to address specific local needs and challenges, which is why you see such a diverse range of strategies and priorities, all working towards that common goal of systemic excellence.
So it's really about building up the entire educational system, not just focusing on individual growth. What are some of the global common goals when it comes to capacity building?
Globally, a common overarching goal of capacity building is to elevate educational quality through strategic, often long-term investment. This includes tangible improvements like upgrading physical infrastructure. Think modern classrooms, labs, digital connectivity.
The basics.
The basics, but also comprehensive professional development for all educators, from teachers to administrators, ensuring they have the skills to lead and innovate. Crucially, it also means establishing effective management systems and governance structures that can support long-term educational objectives, making sure reforms are sustainable and deeply embedded, not just fleeting initiatives.
Yeah.
It's a holistic approach, recognizing all the pieces have to work together.
How do different countries approach this huge task of capacity building, reflecting their unique challenges and strengths?
Their approaches are indeed a mirror of their unique contexts. Germany and Singapore, for instance, are often cited as examples with their highly structured and robustly funded programs. These focus on comprehensive improvements, teacher training, curriculum development, advanced infrastructure, supporting a high standard of learning.
And elsewhere.
In stark contrast, countries like India and South Africa often integrate capacity building within much broader national educational reforms, specifically targeting systemic issues like access and equity, aiming to reduce those deep-seated disparities across diverse regions.
Right.
The U.S. and Canada, on the other hand, tend to place a strong emphasis on research-driven innovations, leveraging academic insights and technological advancements to build educational capacity and foster cutting-edge learning environments.
And what are the positive outcomes when these massive systemic efforts in capacity building actually work?
Oh, the positive outcomes of effective capacity building are truly transformative. It leads to significant, measurable improvements in educational quality by ensuring necessary resources, training, support are consistently available.
That makes sense.
It profoundly enhances schools and systems' ability to adapt to new challenges, like unexpected crises or rapid tech shifts. This fosters highly effective teaching practices and, in turn, improves overall institutional performance and accountability. Crucially, well-implemented capacity building can also foster far more equitable educational opportunities by directly addressing and mitigating disparities in resources and training, ultimately working towards a more level playing field for all students, regardless of their background or location.
It sounds like a truly foundational pillar for educational progress. But with such an ambitious and large-scale goal, there must be significant, persistent challenges that stand in the way.
You're absolutely right. Despite the clear benefits, challenges persist. One major hurdle is the chronic uneven access to resources and training, which unfortunately often perpetuates existing educational inequalities between different regions or even institutions in the same country.
Still fighting that battle.
Still fighting it. Implementation issues are also rife. These can range from inadequate funding, bureaucratic red tape, to a lack of sustained political will, all of which frequently hinder the long-term effectiveness of capacity-building efforts.
Right.
Furthermore, the process itself is inherently complex. It requires deep collaboration and often takes a considerable amount of time to yield tangible results. This slow pace can sometimes lead to resistance from stakeholders who expect quicker fixes, or just difficulties in achieving long-term sustainability. It makes it a continuous, often uphill battle to maintain momentum and commitment.
So we've dissected the modern definitions and the intricate processes of cultivating talent in our contemporary world. But the very word talent has this fascinating ancient history, one that takes us far beyond our current understanding of innate ability or corporate potential. Could you take us back in time to the original meaning of talent? Because it might just surprise people.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is that the word talent itself originally referred to a unit of money in ancient times, not an inherent skill at all.
Money.
Money. And it wasn't just a small coin, it was a truly significant amount. In the Roman and Greek eras, a talent typically weighed around 80 pounds or 36 kilograms of precious metal, usually silver.
Wow.
As a unit of currency, a single talent was valued at approximately 6,000 denarii. Now, to put that into perspective, a denarius was the typical payment for a day's labor for a common worker.
Okay, so 1 day's wage.
1 day's wage. So one talent was worth roughly 20 years of a common worker's wages, assuming a 6-day work week.
20 years, that's huge.
It's huge. This historical context completely transforms our understanding. It immediately elevates the idea beyond just innate personal ability to something of immense, quantifiable economic value, a significant asset to be managed.
That's a mind-boggling sum of money. 20 years of labor that completely reframes how we might think about the famous parable of the talents from Matthew 25. Let's dive into that story. What's the core narrative that sets up this ancient lesson?
Right, the parable of the talents. It tells the story of a master preparing to leave on a long journey. Before he departs, he entrusts his substantial property, specifically these units of money talents, to 3 of his servants.
Okay.
He gives one servant 5 talents, another 2, and a third only 1. And importantly, it says he distributed them according to the ability of each man. This implies some degree of trust and discernment on the master's part.
He knew who could handle what?
Seems like it. When he finally returns after a significant absence, he calls the servants to settle accounts. The first 2 servants, they excitedly explain that they diligently invested their master's money and successfully doubled their investments.
Good for that.
And each is rewarded with the master's effusive praise. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. High praise.
But the third servant's story takes a dramatically different turn, doesn't it? It's not a story of doubling down.
No, it's quite the opposite. The third servant, out of palpable fear, had simply taken his single talent and buried it in the ground. Kept it safe, sure, but totally unproductive.
Just hit it.
Just hit it. When confronted by the master, his justification is, well, it's chilling. He said, Lord, I knew you, that you are a hard man, reaping where you had not sown and gathering where you had not scattered. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the earth. Lo, there you have, that is yours.
Well, he basically calls the master exploitative.
He does. He frames the master as an exploitative figure, someone who profits from others' labor without contributing himself.
And the master's response is swift and incredibly severe, isn't it? There's like zero mercy here.
You're right. The master shows absolutely no leniency. He condemns the third servant as wicked and slothful.
What?
He argues that even if the servant was fearful, he should have at least put the money on deposit with the bankers to earn the bare minimum expectation of productivity, even without taking big risks.
Okay, even that would have been something.
Right. The master then orders that the 1 talent be taken from this unprofitable servant and given to the servant who now possesses 10. This leads to the parable's most controversial and often quoted line. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath.
Oof, that's rough.
It is. And the parable concludes with the unprofitable servant being cast into outer darkness, which is a metaphor for utter despair and ruin.
That's a truly harsh outcome, and that line about taking from those who have not is particularly jarring. Now, there's also a similar parable in Luke's gospel, the parable of the minas. How does that compare to Matthew's version? Are there key differences?
Yeah, the parable of the minas in Luke 19 is thematically similar, but it has distinct and significant elements. In Luke's version, 10 servants each receive 1 mina. Now, a mina is a smaller unit of currency compared to a talent maybe worth about 100 denarii, so about 3 months' wages.
Okay, still significant, but less than a talent and more equal distribution.
Exactly, more equal. Importantly, Luke's parable weaves in a much more overt political subplot. The master is depicted as a nobleman who travels to a distant country to obtain a kingdom.
Politics.
Right. While he's away, his citizens send a defiant message after him, declaring they do not want him as their ruler. Upon his triumphant return, the nobleman not only settles accounts with his servants, but also instructs that his political opponents, those who opposed his rule, be brought before him and slain.
Slain. Wow, that's far more violent and overtly political than Matthew's version. Are there historical parallels that might shed light on this political element in Luke's account?
There are strong historical echoes, yeah. Scholars have long noted the striking parallels between Luke's version and historical accounts from the Roman period, particularly Josephus's detailed description of Herod Archelaus. Archelaus, after his father Herod the Great died, traveled to Rome to get confirmation of his rule from Emperor Augustus. Josephus recounts how a delegation of Jews indeed sent an embassy to Augustus to vehemently oppose Archelaus' claim to the kingdom.
Just like the parable.
Just like the parable, and chillingly upon his return, Archelaus was known for his ruthless suppression of dissent, including a reported slaughter of 3,000 of his enemies at the temple in Jerusalem.
Good grief.
So this historical context suggests that Luke's parable might also be a poignant, perhaps even veiled commentary on contemporary political realities and the nature of tyrannical power prevalent during that era. It grounds the spiritual lesson in very real-world dangers.
So these parables aren't just abstract lessons. They're deeply rooted in the socio-economic and political realities of their time. Given these narratives, how have these parables traditionally been interpreted, especially within Christian teachings?
Traditionally, and for centuries really, the parable of the talents has been interpreted as a powerful exhortation, a call for Jesus' disciples to actively use their God-given gifts in service of God, and importantly, to take risks for the sake of the kingdom.
And gifts means?
These gifts are understood broadly. They encompass not only financial wealth, in line with the original meaning of talent, but crucially also personal abilities, which is how we primarily use the word talent today.
Our skills, our intelligence.
Exactly. The underlying implication is clear. Failure to use one's gifts productively, or to invest them wisely, will result in a negative judgment. Some interpretations even look at it psychologically or spiritually, suggesting the third servant's failure stemmed from his inability to truly feel God's love. He saw God as a harsh taskmaster, not a generous benefactor, and that fear crippled his initiative.
So it's about being actively productive with what you've been given, whether it's an inherent ability or a tangible resource. But I understand there are also deeper, more profound theological interpretations that go beyond mere productivity.
Yes, absolutely. There are interpretations that dig much deeper. Catholic Bishop Robert Barron, for example, drawing on insights from Professor Robert Schoenstein, offers a much profounder interpretation. He suggests that the talents in this parable symbolize something far more significant than just abilities or wealth. He argues they represent a share in the mercy of God, a participation in the weightiness of the divine love.
Wow. Weightiness of divine love.
Yeah. In ancient Jewish culture, a talent was not only heavy, but also tied to the concept of kabod, which means heaviness or glory, often associated with the glory of God. So this interpretation suggests that the greatest talent we possess is actually the capacity to give and receive love.
Love is a talent.
Exactly. And that true investment lies in taking courageous risks, with that love extending mercy, living out compassion, even when it feels vulnerable or when the odds seem stacked against us. It's a radical shift from an economic understanding to a relational one.
That's a beautiful and challenging perspective. Does this interpretation expand to encompass all gifts from a divine source, not just love or abilities?
It does. Cornelius a Lapide, a renowned biblical commentator, broadly views talents as representing all gifts bestowed by God. This comprehensive understanding includes gifts of grace, like faith, charity, other theological virtues, even miraculous abilities, like healing or speaking in tongues.
Right.
It also extends to natural gifts, like a keen intellect, sound judgment, practical wisdom, eloquence. And it includes external goods, things like honors, riches, social standing, powerful connections.
So basically everything.
Basically everything. The core belief is that God, in his divine wisdom, distributes these gifts unequally according to his good pleasure, but with the express purpose that each person should use them for God's glory and for the ultimate good of themselves and all of humanity. It's a call to profound responsibility for everything we've been given.
This broad concept of divine gifts and their responsible use instantly brings to mind John Milton's famous sonnet, "When I consider how my light is spent." Milton, who went blind, wrestled with his own talent, lodged with me useless. How does his reflection tie into this discussion of productivity and divine expectation?
Milton's sonnet powerfully captures that existential anxiety, doesn't it? The fear of a gifted individual that they haven't used their abilities sufficiently, especially when facing a huge challenge like blindness. He laments his one talent, which is death to hide, lodged with me useless, expressing his deep fear of failing to serve God because of his diminished capacity.
Heartbreaking.
It is. However, his eventual profound conclusion, "They also serve who only stand and wait," offers a deep theological critique of a purely economic or productivity-driven interpretation of the parable.
How so?
It implies that true service and faithfulness might not always be about relentless accumulation or visible output or constant active performance. It might sometimes be about patient readiness to God's will, even in times of seeming inactivity or waiting. Some literary critics even see his portrayal of God as a king, contrasting with the harsh master in the parable, as a subtle pushback against the idea that God demands a strictly utilitarian, quantifiable return on the gifts he bestows. It opens the door to a more compassionate understanding of divine expectation.
This concept of using what's been entrusted to you for a greater purpose resonates so strongly with the broader ancient idea of stewardship, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What's truly illuminating here is how the parable of the talents serves as a powerful central illustration of the core theological belief in stewardship. Stewardship, at its heart, posits that human beings are not ultimate owners, but rather temporary caretakers.
Caretakers, not owner.
Exactly. We are responsible for the world, for humanity, and for all the gifts and resources, whether tangible or intangible, that have been entrusted to us by a divine creator. This foundational belief begins and ends with the understanding that God owns everything. As Psalm 24.1 declares, "The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it." It's a profound shift from entitlement to responsibility.
So it's not just about money or even our personal skills, but about everything we're given, our very existence, our environment. Are there other biblical examples that reinforce this expansive idea of stewardship beyond the parable of the talents?
Yes, certainly. The concept of stewardship is really woven throughout biblical texts. Beyond the parable of the talents, consider Adam's original role in the Garden of Eden, as described in Genesis 2.15. He's placed there to dress it and to keep it, signifying a direct responsibility for cultivating and maintaining creation, not just exploiting it.
Right, tending the garden.
Tending the garden. Likewise, the concept of the Sabbath for the land in Leviticus 25 dictates that the land must have a year of rest every seventh year. This wasn't just a religious custom, it was a practical instruction to prevent its exhaustion, ensuring long-term sustainability and preventing the abuse of natural resources for short-term gains. These examples consistently show a pervasive theme of responsible, long-term management of all resources, both natural and human, reflecting a deep respect for their origin and purpose.
So stewardship really expands the idea of talents beyond just material wealth or even individual abilities to encompass this profound ethical responsibility for everything we interact with. How does this ancient, powerful concept manifest in modern applications? Is it still relevant in our contemporary world?
Oh, the concept of stewardship is incredibly relevant today. It permeates various aspects of modern life. It's very much alive in modern Christian ministries, for example, where you see financial leaders like Dave Ramsey encouraging intentional financial stewardship, urging people to manage their money, time, and personal talents, not just for individual gain, but as a reflection of their values.
Okay, so personal finance.
Personal finance, but beyond that, it even has tangible political implications. For instance, in the Netherlands, the CDA, Christian Democratic Appeal Party, lists stewardship as a key ideal. This refers not just to environmental care and sustainable resource management, but also to a principled stance towards human and social resources. It emphasizes a commitment to clear, long-term principles over short-sighted pragmatism. It suggests that how we manage all resources, from our personal skills to public funds, reflects a deeper moral and ethical stance about our collective future.
That's a truly seamless bridge from ancient teachings to our modern world. And in that modern world, particularly within organizations, the idea of talent has become a literal battleground. We often hear about the war for talent, this desperate competition to attract and retain the best. How does this play out in practice, and what does it mean for individuals caught in this war?
Yeah, the war for talent vividly illustrates how modern talent management often adopts what you could call an elitist perspective. It's less about developing everyone and more about intensely focusing on a small, carefully identified percentage of high-potential employees.
The chosen few.
The chosen few. These individuals are often branded with terms like superkeepers or A-listers, and the result is the creation of what's effectively a two-tier experience within organizations. On one tier, you have the talented, who receive accelerated career growth, enhanced status, preferential treatment, often disproportionately higher rewards.
And the other tier?
The other tier is the vast majority of the workforce, whose career trajectories and opportunities might feel pretty stagnant by comparison.
So being identified as part of this elite group comes with truly significant advantages, shaping one's entire career trajectory.
Absolutely. Those formerly identified as talented gain considerable benefits. Increased status, access to a richer, more strategic organizational vocabulary that frankly makes them sound more competent.
Really? Just the language?
Yeah. And a pervasive perception of higher competence. Interestingly, studies show that individuals endowed with high status can sometimes even appear to work less hard than their lower status colleagues, yet still be seen as high performers.
No way.
Yeah. They also receive greater deference in discussions and preferential treatment in resource allocation. The critical flip side, of course, is that the loss of these benefits, maybe through a poor performance review or a shift in organizational priorities, can cause significant negative psychological reactions in employees. Feelings of demotion, inadequacy, disengagement.
This intense focus on a select few and the resulting two-tier system brings us to a crucial modern debate, one that sparks incredibly strong opinions, especially online. It boils down to this. Do gifted individuals have a moral obligation to contribute to science and progress? Is intellect and ability a purely individual trait? Or is it, in some fundamental way, a shared resource that demands broader contribution? Our sources include a fascinating Reddit discussion that dives headfirst into this very dilemma.
Oh yeah, that Reddit thread really brought this question to life through a pretty relatable anecdote. It started with a highly intelligent science student, someone with clear aptitude for research, who announced they planned to pursue a career in art instead.
Okay, different path.
Immediately, a classmate questioned why he wouldn't use his obvious intellect for science and progress, implicitly suggesting he had a duty to do so. This quickly set the stage for a passionate debate, contrasting the deeply held value of personal autonomy against the perceived needs of societal benefit.
So what were the main arguments from those who pushed back against this idea of a moral obligation? What did they prioritize?
A powerful and recurring argument against such an obligation was rooted firmly in individual autonomy and self-determination. Many users passionately felt that forcing someone into a career path they don't genuinely want to pursue is inherently immoral. It violates basic human rights and individual freedom.
Makes sense.
A crucial point they made was that disinterest often leads to ineffectiveness. If a person isn't genuinely passionate about science, forcing them into a lab, regardless of their raw intelligence, would likely result in a less effective, less productive contribution and potentially a miserable life for that individual. It would be a waste, really.
A waste of their life and potential. And it wasn't just about the personal cost, was it? There was also a broader perspective on what truly constitutes progress beyond just scientific advancements.
Precisely. Counter-arguments highlighted that life is more than optimizing society for science and technology. They pointed out, quite forcefully, that other fields, particularly the arts, also demand and utilize immense intelligence, creativity, systematic thinking.
Like what examples?
They gave examples like the intricate technical skills involved in video production, the nuanced artistry of cinematography, or the precise engineering of sound design. They argued that these contribute equally, if not more sometimes, to human flourishing and societal well-being. The argument was that true progress encompasses human culture, emotional understanding, creative expression, not just technological innovation.
It also seems like they challenged the very assumption that raw intelligence automatically translates to groundbreaking research success.
That was a key insight from the discussion, yeah. Participants argue that research success isn't solely about high intelligence. It heavily relies on factors like relentless persistence, serendipitous luck, and often highly unconventional, even eccentric thinking.
Not just being book smart.
Not just being book smart. Simply forcing smart test takers into research roles could very well lead to a cohort of disgruntled, unproductive individuals who lack the unique drive, curiosity, or comfort with failure that true scientific discovery demands.
Right.
Furthermore, the debate emphasized that art and science are often profoundly complementary. As one user eloquently put it, art inspires, science defines.
Yeah.
They posited that a truly well-rounded, vibrant society needs both, that finding the art in science and vice versa is essential for a deeper understanding of the human experience and the universe. They're not mutually exclusive, they're two sides of the same coin.
Okay, that covers the arguments for individual autonomy and the broader definition of societal contribution. Now let's look at the other side. The arguments for a moral obligation, often stemming from a utilitarian perspective or a broader sense of societal benefit. What were their key points?
Right, the utilitarian perspective. The argument is often framed this way. If an individual possesses the unique capacity to significantly reduce widespread suffering or dramatically increase overall human pleasure or well-being, and they can do it at a relatively low personal cost, then a strong moral obligation might exist to act.
Okay, the greater good argument.
The greater good argument. A very stark hypothetical used to illustrate this was Jane, the medical researcher. She's on the verge of discovering a cure for HIV, a breakthrough that could save millions of lives. But after winning the lottery, she immediately quits her life-saving work, leaves her research incomplete, undocumented, to pursue a career as a stripper.
Whoa, extreme example.
Very extreme. But the question posed was, from a societal benefit standpoint, is this ethical? Many would argue from a utilitarian perspective that it is profoundly unethical because the potential collective good vastly outweighs the individual's preference in such an extreme case.
That's a truly provocative example. What other arguments supported this idea of a societal obligation?
The classic, maybe a bit cliched, but still powerful idea of great power, great responsibility was frequently invoked.
Tide of men.
Exactly. It reinforces the notion that with significant intellect, unique abilities, or exceptional influence comes a kind of moral imperative to contribute positively to the human condition. Another perspective suggested that for society to function optimally and progress, individuals must give according to ability and take according to need. This implies a sort of social contract where those who can contribute more should.
Like a duty.
A duty. Some also put forth a progressive view of societal advancement, arguing that civilization advances in a cyclical fashion. Science breakthroughs often precede and enable artistic advancements, which in turn drive broader civilizational progress. While acknowledging the value of all fields, this perspective still implicitly leans into the idea that those who are gifted in whatever area have a duty to contribute something significant to this forward momentum.
This constant tension between individual freedom and societal contribution leads us directly into what can be a true ethical minefield. Modern talent management practices within organizations. One of the first problems that leaps out is the very act of identifying talent. How unbiased is that process, really, in the real world?
It's a critical question, and what's fascinating and often problematic is that despite being carefully designed and portrayed as neutral, talent identification, particularly through appraisal schemes, is highly prone to deep-seated human biases.
Like what kind of biases?
Rater bias is a significant and pervasive issue. It's influenced by factors far beyond objective performance, such as a manager's prior involvement in appointment decisions, maybe they hired the person, or even simpler things like impression management by the employee or simply personal liking.
So office politics.
Basically, the appraisal process itself can become a highly political arena where ratings might be deliberately inflated to avoid conflict or, conversely, strategically suppressed to keep someone in a particular role or prevent their promotion.
So it's not just about what you do. It's about how that performance is perceived, who's perceiving it, and how it fits into the existing power dynamics of a system.
Exactly. Individuality, that unique spark that defines true talent, is often only recognized if it rigidly aligns with the organization's specific, often narrow ideals of what talent looks like. This can inadvertently suppress other valuable traits or innovative approaches that just don't fit that predefined mold.
That's a shame.
It is. Furthermore, in our increasingly globalized world, social and geographic distance can profoundly compromise fair identification. It's simply harder to spot, assess, and nurture talent effectively if you're not physically close to those making the decisions or if cultural nuances are missed. This can lead to a homogeneous talent pool rather than a truly diverse one.
And a pervasive issue within talent identification, particularly in leadership roles, is gender bias. That's a well-documented problem, isn't it? It raises huge ethical questions.
It really does. How do we ensure fairness when the very definitions of talent might be biased? Leadership, for decades, has been largely described in heavily masculine terms, tough, competitive, analytical, unemotional, task-oriented.
The traditional view.
Right. These deeply ingrained constructs inherently bias talent searches against women who might lead differently, perhaps more collaboratively or empathetically. The numbers unfortunately speak for themselves. Women remain significantly underrepresented on corporate boards, often around 12% in major economies like the UK, France, Germany. Even in public sector top jobs, it's only about 25% in the UK. These figures starkly indicate substantial systemic barriers.
And it's not just the implicit definition of leadership, but also the very structure of work itself that can create disadvantages for women and probably others with different life circumstances too.
You've hit on a crucial structural issue. Talent is often sought within the context of demanding full-time, long-hour jobs. This long hours mindset, sometimes even explicitly used as a proxy measure for energy and drive.
Right, FaceTime.
Exactly. It inherently disadvantages women who disproportionately hold part-time positions due to childcare responsibilities, elder care, or other societal factors. Organizations are now facing increasing pressure to critically reconsider these heavily gendered and often rigid views of leadership and talent. They have to develop more inclusive frameworks to create a truly equitable playing field.
It seems essential.
And beyond gender, even seemingly innocuous factors like personal attractiveness and grooming can subtly influence perceived success, further complicating what we call fair identification. It means organizations must actively recognize these biases and implement robust systems to counteract them, rather than just hoping for objectivity.
This intense, almost exclusive focus on an elite group, while perhaps efficient for some, can also have a deeply dehumanizing effect on the rest of the workforce, can't it? What are the psychological ramifications of being labeled, even implicitly, as not talented enough?
It's a profound ethical concern. The practice of focusing so intensely on a small group as an elite, whether explicitly or implicitly, can be deeply dehumanizing for the excluded majority. It sends a powerful, often unspoken message of inferiority.
That they're just average?
Or less. It can subtly but effectively suppress their opportunities to flourish, to feel valued, or to express their full individual identity within the organization. When employees feel that less is expected of them, or that they are not considered high potential, it can trigger negative emotional states like disengagement, resentment, a diminished sense of self-worth.
And that probably affects their work too.
Ironically, yes. It can even lead them to underperform, fulfilling the very underperformer label that was implicitly, or sometimes explicitly, assigned to them. It becomes a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of lowered expectations.
So it creates this very real in-group and out-group dynamic with significant psychological consequences that can really fragment an organization.
Exactly. Psychological studies in group dynamics clearly show that in-group members, in this case, the talented elite, might unconsciously attribute more human essence, more unique individuality to their peers within that elite group, while viewing out-group members as somehow less human or more interchangeable. This dynamic, while common in many social groups, is exacerbated in talent management by the explicit praise and preferential treatment given to stars, often at the expense of downplaying or overlooking the consistent contributions of others.
That sounds divisive.
It is. This group separation significantly increases psychological distance and can lead to a dehumanizing level of abstraction between individuals, fueling division, resentment, and a corrosive us versus them mentality within the organization.
Given these inherent challenges and the potential for unintended negative consequences, it becomes absolutely critical to evaluate modern talent management practices through various ethical frameworks. Let's start by applying the ethics of care. What does that perspective reveal about an employer's responsibilities?
From a care ethics perspective, a core probing question is, how far does an employer's moral responsibility to care extend to all employees? This isn't just about providing basic working conditions, but about fostering an environment where everyone has opportunities for growth and development.
Right.
When an organization selects a specific elite group for special treatment and accelerated development, it can certainly be accused of favoritism, of not caring equally for all. However,
There's a but.
There's a counter-argument. If enabling the most talented to succeed ultimately benefits the majority by strengthening the organization as a whole, perhaps through increased innovation, market share, stability, then that favoritism could arguably be justified if it leads to enhanced job security or expanded opportunities for everyone. It's a nuanced consideration. Individual preferential treatment versus the collective benefit. Does focusing care on a few ultimately elevate the whole?
Moving on to duty ethics, or a Kantian approach. This framework, if I understand correctly, cares less about the outcome and more about the intrinsic rightness of the action itself. How does that apply to talent management?
That's a key distinction. Duty ethics, deeply rooted in Kantian philosophy, emphasizes doing the right thing simply because it is the right thing to do, not primarily for its positive consequences. This framework really questions the underlying intentions of talent programs.
The motivation behind it.
Exactly. If a program is driven primarily by pure organizational self-interest, say, to improve efficiency, retain high-impact employees purely for profit, or boost the company's public image, then from a pure Kantian perspective, it might fall short of being truly ethical. Kantian ethics demands that the action itself, the talent program design, must be morally right in its essence, regardless of the desired outcome.
So the why behind the program is more important than the what it achieves. That seems like a tricky standard for businesses to meet.
Precisely. It forces us to ask critical, almost uncomfortable questions. Kant proposes several tests. First, the rule of universality. Would you want all similar organizations to operate a talent program in this specific, perhaps exclusive way? If that universal application would lead to a fundamentally unjust or unworkable system, it's ethically compromised.
Okay.
Second, reversibility. Would you, as an individual, want to be treated in this exact way, whether you're included or excluded from the program? If you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of its downsides, it fails.
Put yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. And crucially, respect for humans. Are people treated as ends in themselves with inherent dignity or merely as means to an organizational end, like cogs in a machine designed to generate profit? Any no answer to these questions compromises the program's ethical standing from a duty ethics perspective. It's a rigorous framework, and admittedly, it can be quite challenging for practitioners navigating the pragmatic realities of organizational competition and survival.
Next, let's consider virtue ethics, inspired by Aristotle. This framework shifts focus from rules or duties to character and flourishing. How does that evaluate talent management?
Virtue ethics is less concerned with rigid rules and more with the development of moral character and what Aristotle called practical wisdom. In a business context, it means making decisions shaped by accumulated experience, aimed at the betterment of the organization and all its stakeholders, and fostering classical virtues like courage, fairness, moderation.
Okay.
From this perspective, talent management is deemed ethical if it genuinely contributes to a person's full inherent potential, leading to their flourishing, which, for Aristotle, was the highest good. It's about helping individuals become the best version of themselves, not just the most productive employees.
So it's about helping people become their best selves. Does this framework then see the talented as a kind of aristocracy, the best people?
Yes, it can, but with a specific interpretation. Virtue ethics can indeed view the talented as an aristocracy, not in terms of inherited privilege, but as the best people in terms of being the most virtuous and effective leaders.
Virtuous leaders.
Right. These are individuals whose personal ambitions, maybe for power or wealth, are tempered by primary virtues like courage in decision-making, justice in resource allocation, and moderation in their demands. Organizations, in this view, strategically use their descriptions of talent to project an image of themselves as being led by individuals associated with these specific virtues, aiming to inspire trust and demonstrate ethical leadership.
Are there any constraints or potential pitfalls with this approach? What could undermine a virtue-based talent program?
A critical constraint is the practical realities of modern work, particularly work-life balance. If achieving high performance through a talent program demands that individuals compromise their health, neglect their relationships, or engage in manipulative behavior to meet targets, then the very virtuous behavior the framework champions is fundamentally undermined. Serious ethical problems arise.
Right, it becomes counterproductive to virtue.
Exactly. Furthermore, virtue ethics requires a truly fair and unbiased assessment of an individual's true potential and character, ensuring that an organization's definition of talent genuinely aligns with generally accepted schemas of business virtues. If the identification process is flawed, it can create a false aristocracy that lacks true virtue. Organizations, as primary moral agents, must ensure their programs genuinely aim to develop these virtues, not just exploit existing ones.
This naturally leads us to distributive justice, specifically John Rawls' influential theory. How does this framework, which focuses on fairness in social arrangements, apply to talent management within an organization?
Distributive justice focuses intensely on the fair distribution of opportunities, resources, and burdens within social organizations. From a Rawlsian perspective, talent management inherently involves distributing development opportunities based on an individual's present and future contribution to the organization. While Rawls's theory accepts that some inequality might exist in opportunities, acknowledging that not everyone will receive the same training or fast-track access, it posits that such inequality is acceptable only if it ultimately benefits everyone within the system.
Benefits everyone.
For example, if the exceptional efforts and innovations of an elite talent pool genuinely enhance the overall job security for the majority of employees, then that inequality and opportunity is conditionally just, according to Rawls.
So it's not about equal outcomes for everyone, but a strong emphasis on equal opportunity within the organization.
Exactly. While Rawlsian justice does not advocate for equal outcomes, recognizing differences in effort, skill, contribution, it strongly emphasizes equal opportunity. The ethical question for talent program designers becomes, are opportunities for talent identification and development genuinely provided, or at least made accessible, for all employees, even if not everyone will be selected for the elite pool?
Yeah, for those not in the pool.
Right. Even for those not in the talent pool, is the organization providing reasonable development opportunities relative to their position, contribution, and potential? It's about ensuring the playing field is level for access to growth, even if the destination isn't identical for everyone.
And there's also Rawls' famous difference principle. How does that come into play with talent management and resource allocation?
The difference principle is a cornerstone of Rawlsian thought. It states that social and economic inequalities are permissible only if they benefit the least advantaged members of society.
Okay, the least advantage must benefit.
Applied to talent management, this means that the resources dedicated to the elite group, their training, accelerated development, higher salaries, should not, under any circumstances, disadvantage the excluded majority. For example, an organization shouldn't spend its entire training and development budget on a select elite group, leaving nothing or almost nothing for the rest of the workforce.
Makes sense.
This principle ensures that any benefits derived from cultivating exceptional talent are ultimately shared, or at least do not actively harm, the broader employee base. The prosperity of the vital few should not come at the expense of the many.
Finally, let's examine talent management through the lens of stakeholder theory and utilitarianism. How do these frameworks assess the ethical standing of these programs?
Stakeholder theory posits that managers have duties not just to owners and shareholders, but to all parties with a legitimate interest or stake in the organization. This certainly includes all employees.
Employees are key stakeholders.
Absolutely. They have a very significant stake, risking career stagnation, income loss, even job loss, if the organization isn't managed ethically. Utilitarianism, a close ethical cousin, judges an action solely by its consequences, whether it maximizes benefits over harm for all affected parties.
So a talent program would only be ethical if it demonstrably benefits everyone, not just the vital few it targets.
Precisely. Talent management only passes the utilitarian test if it can genuinely be shown to produce more overall good, more benefits, less harm than alternative courses of action for the entire workforce, not just a select group.
What's the real-world test, then?
The real-world test for a talent program is whether it produces truly effective leaders and innovators who generate new business, enhance the company's stability, and genuinely underpin job security and growth opportunities for the majority of employees. If the benefits are limited only to the vital few who are part of the program, without clear, tangible, measurable benefits for the broader employee base, then from a utilitarian standpoint, the program ultimately fails. It forces organizations to consider the comprehensive, organization-wide impact of their talent strategies, not just the elite.
We've spent a considerable amount of time unpacking the parable of the talents and its traditional interpretations. But what ifs? What if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if this ancient story, far from being a simple lesson on productivity or investing your gifts, is actually a sharp, subversive critique of power and economic injustice?
That's a truly compelling and, increasingly popular reinterpretation, especially among liberation theologians and critical biblical scholars. This perspective suggests that Jesus' parables, including this one, were often intended as biting social commentary on the corruption of power and the prevalent economic injustices of his time.
Not just spiritual lessons.
Not just spiritual lessons, but social critique. Rather than a straightforward blueprint for personal wealth accumulation or ruthless productivity at all costs, it really flips the script on the traditional reading.
So the harsh master from the parable, the one reaping where he did not sow, might not be a figure to emulate at all, but rather a character whose true nature Jesus is deliberately exposing. Is that the idea?
Exactly. This reinterpretation suggests that the master's character described by the third servant as a hard man, reaping where he had not sown, and gathering where he had not scattered, is a deliberate depiction of an exploitative, unjust figure. Maybe like a capitalist who profits from the labor of others without contributing, essentially a kind of robber baron of the time.
Oh.
In this provocative reading, the third servant, far from being wicked and slothful, actually acts as a courageous whistleblower.
A whistleblower? How?
By refusing to participate in the master's exploitative system, by not investing his money, and thus refusing to legitimize the master's unjust gains, he unmasks the master's true predatory nature. His fear wasn't laziness, it was a righteous refusal to be complicit in injustice.
That dramatically alters the meaning of the story, especially that controversial line. For to all those who have, more will be given, but from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. In this light, it sounds less like a divine principle and more like a description of a broken system.
Precisely. In this subversive reading, that controversial phrase isn't an endorsement of some divine mandate for the rich to get richer. Instead, it's a stark, almost cynical description of existing systemic injustice in the world.
Jesus just calling it like he sees it.
Exactly. Jesus is not proclaiming a divine law, but rather articulating the grim reality of a fallen world, where the powerful accumulate more wealth at the expense of the poor and vulnerable. It highlights the brutal consequences of a system built on exploitation, a system where the poor often lose what little they have due to the greed of the rich. It becomes a prophetic lament rather than a moral instruction.
So this reinterpretation suggests that Jesus was fundamentally challenging the prevailing economic structures and calling for something far more radical. What was his message then, if not of productivity?
This reinterpretation posits that Jesus was fundamentally proclaiming a new and yet ancient way of sharing and caring for people. He was not affirming the status quo of accumulation and profit, but emphasizing the intrinsic worth of people rather than profits.
People over profit.
People over profit. This challenges us to see the parable not as a guide for individual gain, but as a profound call for collective solidarity in confronting systemic social, political, and economic injustices. It urges us to use our gifts, our true talents, maybe our voices, our resources, our energy, to dismantle exploitative systems and build a society rooted in compassion, equity, and the flourishing of all individuals, particularly the marginalized. Even if it means directly confronting those in power, it's a call to activism for justice.
This has been a truly comprehensive deep dive into the nature of talent and our often complex obligations to it. We've explored talent from its ancient roots as a weighty unit of money, moving through its modern manifestation as a strategically managed corporate resource, and finally arriving at a radical reinterpretation of an ancient parable that challenges our very notions of productivity and justice. We've wrestled with the powerful arguments for individual self-determination, balancing them against ethical calls for broader societal contribution and accountability.
Yeah, the discussion reveals a fascinating ongoing tension, doesn't it? How do we responsibly empower individuals to reach their full extraordinary potential while simultaneously ensuring that these gifts, whether they're innate or painstakingly cultivated, truly serve a collective good? It's not a simple equation, and the answers are rarely black and white.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener, in your own life, your career, and in the organizations you engage with every day? If talent is, in some fundamental sense, a shared resource, a form of human capital that belongs to the collective, how do we foster environments that develop it equitably, ethically, and for the greatest collective good? How do we make sure the benefits extend far beyond just the vital few and truly uplift everyone?
Consider this provocative thought as you go about your day. In a world grappling with information overload, escalating resource disparities, and profound social challenges, is the true measure of our talent not just how much we can individually accumulate or produce, but how thoughtfully, how justly, and how courageously we choose to share and deploy it for the flourishing of all.